Woodworkers often ask me to recommend a good hand plane that wasn't made 100 years ago and doesn't require a second mortgage in order to purchase. Well, up until now, I haven't had a good answer. But after buying a blue million of these things, I think maybe now I do. Ow. Some of you folks will think this video plays like a commercial, and I apologize in advance for that. I simply found some good tools and I want to share them with you. But, to be perfectly honest, I am an Amazon affiliate. And if enough of you good folks buy tools through the affiliate links, I might have pizza for dinner tomorrow night. Or buy some more hand planes. In any event, I promise to tell it to you straight. The good points, the bad points, and some points that you can make better yourself. These are two hand planes from Pony Jorgensen, a company you may know better for their wood clamps. This is Jorgensen's reimagining of a Stanley No. 4 smoothing plane, and this is their take on a Stanley 60.5 low-angle block plane. At this time, August 2024, you can buy them both for a smidge over $100. If you want to know why you should buy them, take a look at the treasure trove of planes behind me. Many of these I use once in a while when circumstances warrant, but most are simply there because I love old tools. They are a testament to my highly developed skills at winning eBay auctions. The two planes that I use the most often are the Stanley No. 4 and the No. 60.5. These are the two planes that I tell students that they just can't do without. Let's compare these old Stanleys with the new Jorgensens. And of course, the first thing that you notice is that the Stanleys look like hand tools, while the Jorgensens look like fire engines. I'm hoping some of this eye-piercing orange will wear off as we get these things dirty. The second thing that you notice is that the iron on the Jorgensen is much thicker than that on my Stanley. Stanley blades are typically 0.075 inches thick, just shy of 2 millimeters. The Jorgensen mics in at 0.110, almost 1/8 of an inch, or 3 millimeters. The Jorgensen feels heavier than the Stanley, and it is. The Stanley, as I have it set up, is 3 pounds 8 ounces. The Jorgensen is 4 pounds 2. That's 1.59 kilograms to 1.93. I like a heavier plane within reason, of course, because heavier planes have more inertia. Once you get them going, it takes less muscle to keep them going. Finally, both planes have wooden handles. Stanleys are rosewood, walnut, or in this case, beech painted to remind you of rosewood. Jorgensens are beech finished to remind you of beech. In these days, anything other than plastic is a real plus. You may find some of the same things when you compare the low-angle block plane. Although one of the first things I noticed about the Jorgensen, it is not necessarily an evolved version of the Stanley 60.5. It's actually an amalgamation of features from the 60.5, the 65, and the 140, which tells me that the tool engineers who designed the Jorgensen knew their tool history and chose the best option. In the process, they made the Jorgensen disturbingly orange and slightly heavier than the Stanley it's supposedly based on, just as they did with the No. 4 smoothing plane. The Jorgensen weighs 1 pound 7 ounces to the Stanley's 1 pound. That's 0.65 kilograms to 0.45. And the iron is visibly thicker. The Jorgensen folks will tell you that their plane irons are made from 01 tool steel. For those of you who want to look up the American Iron and Steel Institute numbers, the designation is A68101. Stanley plane irons were made from many different tool steels depending on the time and place that they were manufactured. Most of the Stanley irons made after the turn of the century were probably an AISI 1095 or an equivalent. The 01 tool steel has a little more tungsten and chromium to make it a little tougher, and this supposedly helps it retain a sharp edge. But this is a bone of contention among experienced knife makers who love to argue the point endlessly. Nonetheless, 01 is a respectable tool steel. Tell you what, let's disassemble these planes and do a quick inspection of the parts. As you can see, all of the Jorgensen's cast iron parts are thicker than the Stanleys, which probably accounts for much of the difference in weight. And these really aren't cast iron, they're ductile iron, which has completely replaced cast iron in the tool industry. It's tougher and less brittle, and should you drop a Jorgensen plane from a great height, it will likely bend instead of break. It's also more stable and less likely to warp over time. We should have less work to do when we tune this plane and lap the sole. We'll find that out a little later on in this video. In addition to better materials, Jorgensen also did a little extra machining. The machined bed for the frog, which holds the plane iron, is a lot larger on the Jorgensen than these 3 tiny pads on the old Stanley. The same is true of the low-angle block planes. The bearing surfaces that hold the plane iron on the Jorgensen are much larger than they are compared to the Stanley. This should make the plane irons more stable as you use them, which leads us right into the most important part of this comparison. How well do these planes work? I'm going to compare my old Stanleys, which have been tuned and freshly sharpened, with the Jorgensens as they come straight out of the box, with one important exception. It's absolutely necessary to round over the edges of the soles with a mill file. As they come, the arises are sharp enough to cut you. I'm sure that if I use the Jorgensen planes as is, they might dig into the wood. As for the wood, I'm going to plane a board of quarter-sawn white oak. With a specific gravity hovering around 0.7, this is likely to be one of the hardest woods you'll ever work. First, I'm going to use each of the number 4 smoothing planes to smooth the wide surfaces of the boards. I'll smooth one side with the Jorgensen and the other with the Stanley. Next, we'll use a low-angle block plane to remove a little stock from the edges and the ends. And here are the results. This is the surface that I planed with the Jorgensen. And this is the surface that I planed with the Stanley. Now I have to admit the Stanley is a little fuzzier. The Jorgensen is actually smoother, and noticeably so, at least with my hand. This is the edge that I planed with the Jorgensen, and this was the edge that I planed with the Stanley. Both of them cut pretty well, but I found the Jorgensen a little harder to get going, to get set up. This is the end I planed with the Jorgensen, and this is the end I planed with the Stanley. Same thing holds. The Jorgensen was a little harder to use than the Stanley. Well, as you can see, there isn't a great deal of difference. The Stanley and the Jorgensen pretty much match, which is amazing considering the Stanleys are all freshly sharpened and I've been tuning them for ages. The Jorgensens, as I said, are straight out of the box. But I'd like to do one more test. As I mentioned, the Jorgensen low-angle block plane was a little harder to use than the Stanley. I'd like to really tune this up, lap the sole, and sharpen the iron. And then, let's see what we've got. Just taking the plane apart and doing a close inspection, I found something right away. See what happens when I shine a flashlight on the cutting edge? You can see a reflection all along the aris. This is a sure indication the cutting edge is dull, or, more likely, the Jorgensen folks left a burr along the edge when they sharpened it. I'll just bet this is most of my problem, but I'm still going to do a thorough tune-up. I'm not going to make you watch the entire tuning process, but if you'd like to see how to tune a plane, including sharpening the iron, watch our video, Fine-Tuning a Bench Plane, in which I tune a Stanley No. 5. There will be a link at the end of this video. And here it is, all tuned up and freshly wetted. I'm going to replane the same edge on the same board that I had trouble with before. As you can see, that's a much easier cut. Smoother, too. Most times, when you've got a good tool that isn't working for you, all it needs is a little maintenance. It also helped that I lapped the sole. The Jorgensen is nicely machined, but They left some tiny grooves in the sole that you can feel with your fingernail. I like to be able to skew a plane at a slight angle as I cut. This changes the cutting angle and reduces the effort needed. The tiny grooves in the sole make absolutely no difference when you're planing straight ahead. They're parallel to the direction that you're pushing the plane. But if you skew the plane, they'll create some friction. So I'm going to tune up the bench plane as well as the block plane. Both planes will be better for it. There's one more problem that I've discovered and you should be aware of, and that is that it's not as easy to advance the iron on the Jorgensen block plane as it is the old Stanley. There is a slot in the iron and the disc engages the slot. As you turn the disc, it advances the iron. At least that's how it's supposed to work. In reality, the disc catches on the sharp machined arises in the slot. It pulls the iron sideways. The iron still advances, but it ends up at an angle and then it cuts deeper on one side than it does on the other. The fix for this was to ease the edges of the slot. I found that the disc was already eased, but not the slot. You can do this easily enough with a small file or a grinding stone. Then wax the disc and the iron to keep them from catching on one another. It's not a perfect fix, but it does make it easier to adjust the iron. I've got to stop, otherwise I won't be able to find my shop dog in all these curls. The long and the short of all this testing is that these are reasonably good tools with some minor drawbacks. And like all good tools, they get better with some intelligent tuning. I should also point out that they are decent tools at exceptionally reasonable prices. In fact, I think I can safely make this prediction. 100 years from now, someone who likes orange a whole lot better than I do is going to win one of these planes on an eBay auction and feel good about it. If you're interested in buying either of these planes, please check out our new Workshop Companion affiliate store. There's a link at the end of this video as well as in the video description. We just posted this new store to our website. It shows many of the tools that I've used in previous videos and some I just like to use. I can recommend all of these, and I've added my own personal experiences wherever appropriate. Should you decide to buy, a link will take you to Amazon, and Amazon will pay us a small commission. You might also want to visit our bookstore on Shopify. The plans for the sharpening jig that I used during the tune-up, these are in my sharpening book, and there's a link to that as well. Your purchases are very much appreciated. They not only keep us eating pizza, they keep us making videos. So please like, subscribe, and buy something if you're so inclined. And as always, thank you for your kind attention.